Max was a shepherd dog with thick white fur, as white as snow, born among the cold mountains where the winds howled like ancient voices. Since he was a puppy, he followed his owner, old Mr. Ernesto, on long walks through trails, herds, and icy forests. They were inseparable, like the mountain and the sky. Max's reputation grew among the local people. They said he had a magical sense of smell and could find any lost animal, even in the harshest storms. He was protective, quiet, and observant, a true guardian of the valley. But time, which spares no one, began to take its toll on Max's body. His steps became slower, his hearing softer. Still, he never stopped following Mr. Ernesto, even if he needed to take breaks in the middle of the path. When Mr. Ernesto passed away, the family decided to leave their old house in the mountains and move to the city. Amid the rush of moving, the stacked boxes, and the fine snow falling, Max was forgotten in the backyard, lying in his favorite corner, waiting for one last call. The first days were filled with silent waiting. Max looked at the gate, listening for any sound of a car engine or familiar voice. The scent of the family was still there, embedded in the wood, in the soil, in the garden stones. But, over time, that scent disappeared. When hunger grew strong and the cold became cruel, Max understood that he needed to act. Using the instinct that had once saved many herds, he began exploring the region. He found shelter in an old barn and hunted small rodents to survive. The mountain became his home again. At night, he howled at the moon, not out of pain but out of hope. It was his silent call to those who might still be searching for him. His howl echoed through the cliffs, scaring some and moving others. Soon the locals began to call him the ghost of the mountain. What no one imagined was that this old dog, left behind and forgotten by time, still carried within him the spark of courage. A spark that very soon would turn into light to save lives in the darkness of snow. At the base of the mountain, the small rural school organized an excursion to celebrate the end of autumn. It was an old tradition, taking the students to learn about nature before winter took over everything. The children and teachers were preparing with scarves, backpacks, and lunch boxes packed with care by their mothers. The chosen trail was safe, but little used, winding between tall trees covered in moss. The ground, still damp from the rain, reflected the sunlight filtered through the leaves. The children, excited, ran between the bushes, delighted by animal tracks, colorful mushrooms, and small icy streams. Amid the excitement, 3 children, Sophia, Lucas, and Bea, got carried away by curiosity. They followed a narrow path, following tracks that seemed fresh. Laughing and pointing, they were convinced they'd find a deer or a wolf. Within minutes, they lost sight of the rest of the group. When they realized their mistake, the wind began to blow harder. The sky turned gray, covering the treetops, and snow began to fall in fine flakes. What was once a magical scene now seemed threatening. The children held hands, afraid, calling for help, but no one could hear them. Meanwhile, Max, in his shelter of logs and leaves, sensed something different in the air. A new smell mixed with the cold and anxiety made his fur stand on end. He lifted his head, sniffed the wind, and began to walk. Even with his tired bones, Max walked with determination. The trail was faint, covered by the recent snow, but he knew how to read the invisible signs. Subtle marks on the vegetation, broken branches, the scent of an abandoned school lunch. His senses were alive again. The children, huddled under a crooked tree, tried to warm each other. Sophia cried softly and Lucas tried to be brave, but his teeth chattered from the cold. The forest seemed endless, and the sound of the wind made everything feel even more distant. They were starting to lose strength. Then suddenly, through the snow-covered trunks, a figure appeared. A large dog with a serene and focused gaze walked slowly toward them. When he stopped in front of the group and let out a long, deep howl, the children knew they were no longer alone. Hope had returned. Max approached slowly. making no sudden movements, as if he understood the children's fear. His eyes conveyed calm and safety, and his body, though old, still radiated strength. Bia was the first to extend her hand, touching his soft and cold fur. Max's tail wagged gently. He was there for them. The children quickly realized that this dog was no ordinary one. Sophia, her eyes still wet, remembered the stories her grandmother used to tell about the ghost of the mountain. But here in front of her, there was no ghost. There was a silent protector, real, made of flesh, fur, and courage. Max lay down next to the children, allowing them to lean against his warm body. The snow kept falling, covering the landscape with a thick white veil. They stayed there for hours, huddled, while Max kept his ears alert to every sound of the forest, as if calculating the perfect moment to act. When the light of dawn began to tint the sky a pale blue, Max rose with effort. He sniffed the wind, analyzed the surroundings, and with a brief bark, called the children. It was time to move. There was a safe path, but it would be long and challenging. Still, he would guide them. The children followed Max with trembling steps, trying not to slip on the stones hidden under the snow. The dog walked ahead, stopping from time to time to check that everyone was okay. In his eyes, there was an ancient wisdom, as if he had traveled this path many times before. They climbed hills, crossed clearings, and skirted ravines. The trees, covered in ice, seemed to watch them in silence. Max led with precision, avoiding natural traps, listening for sounds no one else could hear. It was as if the mountain spoke to him. Meanwhile, the rescue teams were already searching for the children. Helicopters flew over the forest, and groups armed with flashlights and radios walked the trails, but the mist and strong wind made everything difficult. No one knew exactly where to search. Time was the enemy. Then one of the rescuers, an old lumberjack who knew the region well, heard a howl. It wasn't just any howl. It was a deep sound, full of purpose, coming from a nearby valley. He stopped, looked at the sky, and said with certainty, "That's Max. Follow that howl." Hope had a new direction. Max led the children to a clearing surrounded by snow-covered rocks where the view reached the valley. There, he stopped and looked up at the sky, sniffing the air. His ears twitched with precision. The distant sound of helicopter blades grew closer. This was the chance he had been waiting for, the moment to call attention. The old dog climbed onto a high rock, firmed his paws, and let out a powerful howl. It was a sound that echoed through the cliffs like a prayer, an ancient lament full of purpose that crossed the winds and pierced the mist. A call that did not ask for help, but offered hope. From above, the helicopter pilot pointed toward the sound. "There! That was a howl!" he shouted. The rescuers mobilized. The lumberjack smiled. He knew Max would never fail. The teams ran along the trail and found the children embraced by the great white dog. The reunion was emotional. The children were weak but unharmed. Max, exhausted, lay on the ground covered in ice and closed his eyes for a moment. A firefighter knelt beside him and whispered, "Thank you, old friend." Tears ran down weathered faces. Max, the forgotten one, had been remembered by all. The story spread across the region like a fire of compassion. Newspapers, radios, and even television stations told the tale of the elderly dog who had saved 3 children with courage and instinct. Max became a living legend. The children, now home, drew him as a hero in all their notebooks. Days later, Max's old family showed up, moved and regretful. They searched for him. When they found him, they fell to their knees, hugging him as if they had found a piece of their soul. They apologized through tears and promised never to leave him alone again. Max accepted in silence, with calm eyes. He spent his last years surrounded by love, sleeping by the fireplace and being gently petted by kind hands. He no longer needed to hunt to survive, nor face the cold alone. But sometimes, at dusk, he still stood to gaze at the mountain. It was a part of him, And even after Max passed, locals swear they still hear, on misty nights, a distant howl coming from the cliffs. They say it's the spirit of the old guardian who never left his mountain. Because true heroes do not disappear, they become a part of what they protected forever.